Welcome back to Market Talk, and of course, being powered by John Deere. I'm Susan Littlefield, sitting in this week for Jesse Allen, who is on the road. Of course, he's going to be with the folks at Nutrien. So you're going to hear more about that in the coming weeks as he is headed to Canada. Talk a little weather action. This is probably one of my favorite segments because I'm kind of a weather geek, especially when I get to hear Eric Snodgrass talk. And Eric, I kind of wanted to start out with what's going on right now. We've had some timely rains. We knew that September could bring some rains, especially in my neck of the woods for Nebraska. But there's a lot of, you look right now. I mean, guys are wanting to get in the field harvesting. They want to get the corn chopped. Adding a little extra moisture, though it's welcome, definitely going to be a hindrance a little bit right now.
Yeah, it's kind of odd. Like we're trying to balance how terribly the season finished in the eastern half of the Corn Belt, while you guys over in the western part, you got rain. I mean, Susan, we were jealous. Like we're just sitting there going, "Gosh, it's going to keep raining." But we could not get the Bermuda High to come around strong to open up the Gulf to deliver rain to the Delta, the Mid South, the Midwest. And instead, the flow kind of came through Texas and straight up through Kansas and into Nebraska. And you had storms. Now we did get some rain over the weekend. I mean, this was well predicted. There was a storm system that came through. I think you got to see some of the lightning from it last night as you were coming home, and those storms came across the country into the driest parts of the Midwest and the Mid South. And this morning, heavy rains in southern Illinois were needed. But I'll tell you something. I'm in Champaign County. I was just looking at the fields we keep here at the Champaign facility, the Innovation Farm. We've only had 19 inches of rain on the year. So we've got a crop because we had rain in July, but we were dry early, especially before the spring started. We had some decent rains, and then we found ourselves just. So I mean, what did we get? I got 600ths of an inch of rain last night, and I was like you. I was watching lightning. I stayed up late to keep an eye on it. Even our power went out. I'm like, oh, this is a good sign. The power went out. Like we're gonna get a storm, and they just missed where I was. I think a lot of folks probably feel that way now. The Mississippi's shown it, right? You were telling me you driven over parts of the tributaries to the Mississippi up in Minnesota, and you saw how low they were. The Mississippi this morning was 7.5 feet below low stage. And even though there's rain coming into the Mid-South this week, it's, the ground's going to steal it first. The crop that's still in the ground is going to steal it first. So it's not as though it's going to revive that river system back up to sustainable levels, because week 2 looks dry around the Mississippi basin as well. So it's funny, Susan, most folks around here, I was telling Jesse this last couple of weeks, I've never heard so many people talking about how much they want the decaying remnants of a hurricane to come up the Mississippi.
Right.
And they want to know exactly when it's going to be so they can finish the harvest, right? They're like, let me get the harvest done first, then bring that moisture back in. And I said, if I could dial that up, well, I would do it. But yeah, we're really dry on this side. And I know you've had much better rain over in your part of the Corn Belt.
It's almost a tale of two stories, and it always seems like there's that line, and maybe the Mississippi River is kind of that dividing line in some sense. But when I was up in Minnesota yesterday for the Vikings game and seeing how dark those clouds were, and
Yeah.
knowing that just that area was going to welcome the rains as well, but looking at the Minnesota River and the Mississippi River, and we're farther up north, and even those levels look low. I can't imagine the concern they have as you get closer and closer to the Gulf and the ability to be able to ship those grains down that river levels.
Yeah, and I would love nothing more for there to be just some moisture return out of the Gulf, but the Gulf's not doing it. I mean, the
Right?
Bermuda High is over by the Azores, so we've got Gabrielle and possibly the next name system, which could be Umberto, staying out to open ocean, not coming into the East Coast. Now, that's good and that's bad. There's also drought in the Carolinas that's hurting their crop, and they grow a lot of corn and soybeans in the Carolinas. Can't forget that. The Southeast is very dry, and we're just looking at all of this going, man, this pattern has got to come back in. And here's the crazy thing. If you trace the position of the jet stream and you leave Japan and the jet stream's coming across, it just like jumps up over the United States and then goes right back off to Europe. So there's this bubble in the middle keeping us away from some of the best upper level flow. So what we end up getting out of it is isolated storms, which you've experienced more of these about than the East. And there's just one little sneaky system this week that's going to run right along a boundary that's going to go from Oklahoma into Arkansas, parts of Missouri, and then hit the Mid-South. And it's going to help revive a drought. But that spot I just described at Arkansas, Boot Heel, Missouri, Western Tennessee, Kentucky, that spot, if you just look and compare it to average, is one of the driest spots, not only in the country, but in the world when compared to normal. Yeah, deserts are drier, but I'm saying when compared to normal,
Yep.
I've got a couple of spots in there that have gone like 60 days without rainfall, nothing. And that actually extends all the way over to West Virginia, parts of Pennsylvania and Ohio as well. So yeah, we often hear folks talk about haves and have-nots, and this has been a season of extremes in that regard.
And another morning today where it was that dense fog and you and I've had that conversation before about that whole, folklore of 90 days out, you're going to see some sort of moisture, but for us, that has kind of really held true this entire growing season. Would like to share some of that with you guys.
Yeah,
Um, as you look at the long-term forecast though, do you have some concerns about it being too dry going into October for the Eastern Corn Belt?
I do. If the pattern does not break, in other words, we just stay in this position where the jet stream is so far north, we stay mild and we stay drier. Let's call it drier, not dry.
Okay.
And most of the long range models, even the new stuff from the Climate Prediction Center, they're just not aggressive on returning any sort of rain. Now, last year this happened. We were very dry September and almost all of October, but then November came in and just it rained, and then we settled into this epic winter where we got snow all the way down to New Orleans, right? But it's one of those things where we're trying to balance out the ease of harvest with the risk of field fires, and then the problem of not having a good kind of soil bed, if you will, to put in your fall application if you're going to do it. And so, yeah, Mother Nature just loves to step in the way of everything we want to get done, giving us just enough to get that crop in, but not enough to make it, perfect. So, yeah, I think that's the case for October. Drier is going to be the signal, unless the tropics wake up and send something our way.
All right, so this is National Farm Safety and Health Week this week, and I'm going to put a quick little plug because you did talk about field fires. And as a firefighter, I just want to remind our producers, please always tell somebody where you're at and know your location because it's so easy to say, well, calling 911 and say I'm on the Smith farm, but the Smiths haven't farmed that in 30 years, but everybody knows where it is. So just please be careful, be cautious, clean out those combines because as Eric's telling us, this dryness to continue will just kind of increase that opportunity. So you mentioned one of my favorite words, and that's snow. Obviously, October isn't something we usually think of snow, except for that Halloween storm many, many years ago. But is there the potential as you look at your long term forecast and you look at La Nina and everything else that's ramping up? Is there the potential for some good white stuff this year?
There always is. And yeah, usually with a La Nina, you have a better chance of it only because La Ninas tend to make the central part of North America cooler than average. Um, but last year we had a La Nina, and most of the snow was down way down south. And so we saw much of the northern plains and much of the central plains. The Midwest was in a snow drought last year, despite having enough cold air around. What I do want to know is what angle is the jet stream going to attack the United States this winter? If we keep the Gulf of Alaska ocean temperatures as warm as they are, then the jet will probably dive into the Great Lakes. And in that case, you probably wouldn't have the snow, but the Ohio Valley would. So it's kind
Which
of like
they need it.
it's
Yeah.
just you're going to trade with somebody. But that is a broad brush, look at one feature, the Gulf of Alaska ocean temperatures, which lately have been cooling off. So who knows there? What I would tell you is remember that winter, we always like to make good long winter forecasts. And yeah, we have a La Nina brewing, and that's going to be a part of this winter. But it's always the sub-seasonal things that drive the winter, right? I mean, if you're California, you can make your entire winter's worth of snow in 3 events in January, right? And people often remember nasty, nasty winters when really it was only like 2 weeks that were really bad, but they do enough. What I care about, Susan, is what does the drought monitor look like by April?
Okay.
So I need this winter into next spring to just take the drought, which has ratcheted up 20% just in the last 5 weeks. I need it to come back down significantly by the time we get into spring.
Spring planting's underway in South America. What are you seeing for them right now?
There's a cold front coming up from the south that's going to be enough to bring in some rains. We know that we got some of the early planting numbers out, which these are nothing, right? Like 0.5% planted, but in Mato Grosso. But we watch it because the month of October is the critical month over which we assess how well the season's going to start for them. And there's going to be some rain, which means they're going to get some crop planted. But the monsoon always comes in fits and spurts, which means good rain this week, but next week looks very dry. And so they're going to try to balance that out. But the reality is, if they're not 80% done by the end of October, then we've got a story coming out of South America but they need good rains to get to 80%. And some of the models are a little bit kind of bearish on bringing that rain in. So I think we have a story to watch, but I don't think it's going to be enough to be a market mover.
So, what do you think is going to be the biggest weather highlight over the next 2 weeks?
I think the biggest weather highlight's gonna be the Mid-South rain initially, and then I think, we need to see what that does to the river levels, and then I think after that, folks are gonna go back to this drier, warmer pattern until maybe we get into the 2nd week of October. It's kinda nice, though, to be in a season where no one's, like, talking about frost, right? We're not it's, sometimes, "Oh, the frost comes in early, we're in trouble." But, well, right now, we're so warm, it's not a case.
All right, Eric, thanks so much for the forecast update, and fingers crossed that you all get some good moisture there in the Eastern Corn Belt.
I appreciate it, thank you.
Eric Snodgrass joining us today. We got more coming up with Market Talk after this.